Welcome back to Hugging the Cactus, a Mel Gibson podcast. And today we cover, arguably, the greatest sequel ever made, Lethal Weapon 2. Lethal Weapon 2, greenlit on the cusp of the immense success of Lethal Weapon 1. Written once again by Shane Black. He called the script Play Dirty. He sent in his script. Donner didn't like it. He didn't like it at all. So they contracted a new screenplay writer, which was Jeffrey Boehm. It was considered too light. And another screenplay writer was brought on. This was Warren Murphy, and he combined the two scripts. Now, Shane Black, of course. Shane Black wasn't particularly amused by the situation. In fact, he was quite depressed. Turned down, but he was still paid for it. And apparently he, at some point, told his agent to give the money back. And his agent just basically said, look, everybody writes a crappy script sometimes. This is Hollywood. That was the end of that. And that was also the end of Shane Black's involvement, which is a shame. Jeffrey Boehm, who was brought in to write a new script, is of course famous for The Lost Boys, another Donner project. And he also wrote Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which is interesting because that's a competitor in the same summer that this blockbuster movie was put out. In fact, Steven Spielberg is rumored to have visited the set on the first day when they started shooting, perhaps because he was nervous about the success of his movie, because Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom wasn't really a success, so he really needed The Last Crusade to work. Regardless of what he saw, they ran against each other, and in the end, Lethal Weapon came in third behind Batman and Indy 3. So I guess Spielberg won this round. This one was, of course, directed by Richard Donner again. He did all four, of course. Richard Donner, of course, famous for Superman, The Omen, The Goonies, Scrooged, you name it. He's on the Mount Rushmore of directors, in my opinion. Cinematography was done by Steven Goldblatt, who, again, did Batman. He did Joey versus the Volcano, if you know that movie. And he did The Pelican Brief. Michael Kamen, once again, did the soundtrack with Eric Clapton, and of course the saxophones are done by David Sanborn. This movie once again stars Mel Gibson as Riggs, Danny Glover is back, and they introduced Joe Pesci, who plays Leo Getz. Whatever you need, Leo Getz. It's catchy. Josh Ackland is the bad guy in the movie, and he plays Arjen Rudd. Then there is Derek O'Connor, who plays Peter Vorstedt, who is the heavy. Patsy Kensit plays Rika van den Haas. Originally, it would have been played by Brigitte Nielsen, but they decided otherwise, probably based on her acting skills. Patsy Kensit is of note because she has very few credits. She was actually a pop star at the time. She had a few hits with her band, Here Today, Gone Tomorrow kind of thing, but she was hot for a couple of seconds. And of course, Dean Norris is in the movie. Dean Norris is in everything. Budget and box office. This movie cost double the budget of Lethal Weapon, which is 30 million, and raked in 147 million domestically. Now you have to remember that this is 1989. They would have had maybe 2,000 screens. These days you have 2,000 to 4,000. Ticket price was dramatically lower. People paid $4 for a ticket. How much do you pay now? So really, when you think about the success of this movie, and this movie internationally did 227 million, which in the late 80s was an astronomical amount. As I said, this was the third highest grossing films, so Batman and Indiana Jones cleaned up even better. These were the high days of Hollywood. Now, I did a ton of research on this movie, too much, in fact. I've seen this movie way too many times. Of all the Mel Gibson films, I've probably seen it the most. So I guess you could put me in this is one of the greatest sequels of all times camp. But to be fair, I think Terminator 2 is the greatest sequel of all time. But that's up to the individual. Now, getting into the movie, I'll shove in as much trivia from the director's cut, stuff I found, as I can. but it's fun to do a blow by blow. So the movie starts with a high speed pursuit. You see Riggs and Murtaugh in Murtaugh's wife's car. Riggs is in high spirits and he's communicating with the other pursuit cars. And this is how they kind of introduce the other policemen. This is actually the first scene that was shot. The next shot is, in fact, back at the office when you see the other officers of the precinct learn about the high-speed pursuit and ask what the details are. And the second they know, they start betting on what's going to happen. So at some point, the two cars they are chasing, they split off. Murtaugh gets stuck between several cars because he's too careful with his wife's car. Riggs gets frustrated and he just jumps out of the car and starts running through traffic. At some point, he's hit by one of the cars they are pursuing and his face is stuck to the windshield and he's yelling at the guy that he wants to see his driver's license and registration of the car and proof of insurance, which is kind of funny. The driver brakes and Riggs rolls off the car and he raises his gun and the driver raises his, which is a machine pistol. And he does the old spray and pray. And Riggs just ducks out of the way. I don't think you should recommend doing that to anyone who is looking down the barrel of a machine pistol, but Riggs does it, of course. This is all Mel Gibson doing his own stunts and getting scratched up, typical. So Riggs follows on foot. Murtaugh catches up with him. They start arguing about who's going to drive, typical, because Murtaugh doesn't want to hurt his wife's car, but Riggs manages to convince him. It goes awry the second they get back on the freeway. Riggs wants to overtake. Murtaugh warns there's no room. So he demolishes the car, at least the paint job, and you get a tense scene where Riggs has to agree with him. Yeah, goddamn it, you were right. There was no room. And Murtaugh just gives him this look. And they really play that for laughs. And really it sets the tone of the movie well. High stakes, high pursuit, lots of fun, lots of gags. So they end up cornering one of the cars, but the people in those cars are way better armed. They spray the cop cars with bullets. A helicopter shows up out of nowhere, and these men make their escape, firing their guns. Meanwhile, Riggs and Murtaugh are still in pursuit of the red BMW they are trying to chase down. They get cut off. The Beamer rolls, ends up in some shop, and they move into apprehend, and there's a lot of arguing and screaming, and of course the assailant is gone. And then they hear something clink, and they think he's in the trunk. So Riggs kicks open the trunk, and we get the big reveal, which is a cascade of coins falling out. And Murtaugh identifies these as Krugerrands. Now, Krugerrands are a coin typically minted in South Africa. South Africa is a gold-producing country, and they have this coin as, well, really their national denomination. At the time, there were a lot of anti-South African measures in place by a number of Western countries. Didn't like the apartheid situation that the South Africans had instituted after the abolition of slavery. One of the reasons that the South Africans who are now introduced are the bad guys is because the Murtaugh family had a poster, anti-apartment poster, on their fridge, and apparently Donner got death threats over it, or threat. Who knows? This kind of woke him up to the potential of South Africa as the bad guys, and he urged the screenplay writer Bohm to include this in the screenplay. So this is how they ended up with, well, very unique bad guys. Usually they would be Russians, or as in the case of Die Hard, they were socialist Germans turned robbers. So these South Africans, they make great bad guys. So we're back at the precinct, and the captain is complaining to Murtaugh that the whole thing got way out of hand, but he really doesn't want much to do with it, so he ducks back into his office. Riggs at this point is in a straitjacket, and he's trying to get out. This is some kind of dare. Murtaugh starts laughing at the scene immediately. What Riggs does to get out of the straitjacket is he basically pulls his arm out of his socket to get out. And someone asks, man, doesn't that hurt? And he says, oh, yeah, it does. Not as much as putting it back in. and he then rams his shoulder into a cabinet to get it back into the socket. And the department psychiatrist sees this and confronts him and asks him why he's doing this to himself. And he basically makes a joke of it and says, well, none of them will let me do it to them, and I need the money. And so the question remains here, how sane is Riggs? And this straitjacket gag, is this useful to the plot? Oh, time will tell. Now, Riggs asks Murtaugh if he wants to go get something to eat, and Murtaugh basically says, no, I can't. Rianne's in the commercial and it's on TV tonight. And so Riggs, of course, outs this to this very toxic work environment. And Murtaugh immediately recognizes the threat of the situation is that with this crowd, baby, you better not stink. Basically, when he looks at the picture of his daughter. So it gets domestic. They're at Murtaugh's house, and Murtaugh's showing Riggs the 2-car garage he's building, and he's going to build a hobby room over it. So he's still on his I'm too old for this shit and I'm going to retire soon, which is interesting because he's like 52. I'm 52. So it's like that's a little young to be thinking about retirement, but apparently he thinks that's a good idea. Then again, he is in a very dangerous line of work. They talk to the contractor, and this guy uses a nail gun, and this at some point startles them. And they roll on the floor and pull their guns, scaring the bejesus out of this poor working guy. And this is some foreshadowing here because action might take place in this spot. And if it does, then obviously Riggs and Murtaugh are ready for it. Rianne's commercial comes on. It's not what they hope. It's a condom brand. Murtaugh is not happy. He's a traditional dad. Riggs tries to reassure him, like, no, it's fine. And he's the peacemaker in the family now. Who would have thunk it? He starts to daddy Rianne and her boyfriend to be back by midnight. And, Murtaugh, worried about what's going to happen at the office, says, well, I'm never going to hear the end of it. And I'll never live it down. And Riggs plays it for a joke. He says, nah, it's in one ear and out the rubber. Which is a joke that doesn't really land because he says it so fast that, to non-English speaking people that, you have to read the subtitles. And not every joke lands, but the jokes come at you like a machine gun. Anyway, we see a dark office, and this is interesting. The man who was in the BMW is ushered in, and they talk in Dutch, and badly, I might add. So the boss asks, well, do you have any bones broken? Interesting dialect. The guy says, no, I'm fine. I'm okay. And he says, well, we did lose over 1 million in Krugerrands. Buddy boy. He sort of goes, well, these things happen and sometimes things don't go as planned. Hey, Peter. And that's a signal. And Peter shoots the guy right in the head. Now, he was standing on plastic, and they actually remark about this. The plastic is there not because they're shooting the guy in the head. That's a convenience. The original office that's being repainted is being repainted and is still smelling like paint because it was pink. And when Donner saw it, he freaked out. He said, why did you make it pink? This is for the bad guys. I want it dark. And basically, the set designer said, yeah, but I just wanted to do something different. And maybe he thought he was on the set of Miami Vice. They had a lot of pink. So Rudd worries about the police. They're getting close. And Peter suggests, we could just warn them off. In his experience, a scared cop is more useful than a dead one. A warning, is that not a bit tame? And the guy says, well, it depends on how you do it. And so then you better have a look at this. And they look at the information they have, and they see that Murtaugh is the lead investigator. And they go, a goddamn kafir. Lovely. Now, kafir is an interesting word. It's actually Arab. It means non-believer. But the South Africans used it as a derogatory term to denote black people. So the next scene is, again, domestic. We get a scene with Trish. Trish found Martin's pen in the wash. Apparently, she does his laundry. They found his pen, and she says, is this yours? And Rick says, yeah, it's mine. Yeah, it's a gold pen. It's an expensive pen. There's some weight to this pen, emotional weight, and they have a heart to heart about it. Basically, it was the pen he'd been looking for, and then he found out his wife had been killed in a car accident. So they kind of reintroduced that information. In a daze, he signs out, his wife's remains with that very pen, and I think it's got lost in the wash because he's trying to get rid of it all this time. That night, Rick sits on the beach on the cold stones with his dog Sam, which is cute dog, and they go in and watch the Three Stooges together. It's all really cute. So what they're kind of showing is that Riggs is at peace with himself, that he is not suicidal anymore. That's a new dynamic. So how is Riggs still a lethal weapon? That's an interesting question. Now, the Murtaughs are asleep, and someone is sneaking in. The next second that we see is the Murtaughs getting duct taped by their intruders, and they're yelling Kafirs. Oh, guess who they are? Wondering about your kids, imagining what we've done to them, suggesting, well, we have custody of your kids, and terrible things have happened. This is the old warning. They actually say, this has just been a warning. After this, it gets bloody. Tell your people to back off. And this is kind of like my favorite line from the movie. Don't you go being a smart kafir. Maybe we'll let you live, huh? So that line just gets me. It's just so cold-blooded. Kind of makes you think of South African police stations in Soweto and all those things. Anyway, the kids are fine. They run in to check on them, and everybody's crying, and it's all sad. Now, this is all because Donner smelled controversy and decided, well, I'm going to use the South Africans as the bad guys, which was very topical at the time because South Africa was in the news almost daily. So Roger explains to Martin the next day what happened, and they were on the team, and the captain basically says, look, pulling you guys off, they get babysit duty. So they have to babysit some witness to a capital crime or something. There's actually, the next scene is a deleted scene where they're in the lobby of the hotel and near the pool, and Riggs is chatting up girls at the poolside. So, that's what happens when you're not suicidal anymore. You get horny and you talk to every girl in a bathing suit that you can. More on this later. So they foreshadow that the rest of the police officers are all going to be in a poker game together the next day. So they're all together, they're safe. Now, if you've seen enough horror movies, you know how that's going to end. Not well. So they get to the hotel, and we see a cutscene where a waiter is asked what room this order is for. It's room 612. And the next second, we see Riggs and Murtaugh knock on room 612. Oh, there's poor little Leo. This is Joe Pesci. This is one of my favorite scenes in a movie, the introduction of Joe Pesci, because it really shows what kind of actor he is. Joe Pesci manages to convey a complete character in a matter of maybe 30 seconds. This guy is brilliant. And he does this thing that he keeps doing throughout the movie, which is saying, okay. Now, apparently, according to Pesci, I saw this in an interview, Pesci was at some theme park and he asked some kid directions to a ride or something. And the kid did that. And he remembered it. Next thing you know, it's in a Lethal Weapon movie. The moral of the story here is if you know someone's an actor, don't associate with them because they will just steal your personality. There's a knock at the door. It's room service. They let him in. This is the guy that asked what room food was for. So we all know what's going to happen. Next thing you know, the guy has a gun, and Murtaugh starts shouting and warns Martin, not the window. And of course, they go out the window. Leo goes out the window. The potential killer goes out the window, and Riggs goes out the window, and they fall out of the room 6 floors into a pool. So this is a Lethal Weapon tradition now, falling off buildings and falling into pools. And in this scene, they get 2 for the price of 1, falling to their deaths and drowning. So Riggs thinks he's beating on the assassin, but it's poor little Leo. And meanwhile, the assassin, the assailant, or what you want to call him, escapes from the pool. They have to give poor little Leo his cotton balls for his nose. They become kind of curious. It's like, why would they risk this? Why would they risk popping all 3 of us? I mean, this is attempted murder of 2 policemen. They don't take that shit lightly in Los Angeles. So Leo says, well, I kind of sort of laundered $500 million for the mafia. And so in the next scene, we see Rudd complaining about the botched hit job. They were behind it apparently because they're the mafia and they're behind every capital crime committed in the city. So Peter starts looking around and he says, "What are you doing?" And he's just like, "Oh, just standing to see if I wasn't standing on plastic," which is kind of a cool line. Even the bad guys get cool lines in this movie. So Riggs and Murtaugh, and now Leo Getz, are eating leftover spaghetti. Looks like this is in Murtaugh's house. And so Leo, it's not really exposition. Leo explains how laundering works, money laundering. And Leo explains, well, while I was laundering them, I was scamming them. I basically was taking money off the top. And normally nobody would notice. But Rick says, yeah, but drug dealers do. And yeah, drug dealers do. Now, so meanwhile, there's this gag happening. Riggs puts on his shirt and Leo was doing the laundry. So Riggs puts on his shirt and it's shrunk in the wash. Yeah, I guess Leo's not that good at laundering, is he? Haha, we see what you did there, Donner. Anyway, so Leo remembers, yeah, I had some kind of job interview with a guy and it was like built on stilts in the hills. And so there's another deleted scene here where looking for the house and they looked through the phone book. And because Leo remembered certain numbers, because it has to be 26 because he was 26 when he got his CPA license, and that's how he remembers it. So they find the house. Riggs pretends to be a pool cleaner, but this house doesn't have a pool. So this becomes a mess. This turns into a shootout, and Roger comes to the rescue, and he starts running after the guys, and they recognize the waiter guy from the hotel, and they start pursuing the waiter who steals a truck. It's kind of a rig that carries other cars. So it's this hauling truck, and Rick jumps onto it, and you get Indiana Jones basically from Raiders of the Lost Ark. At some point, the truck stops and it's rear-ended. The car behind flies into the car opposite, and this launches a surfboard right into the driver, which is the criminal. And that's how he dies. It's this insane gag. And it's even crazier because all this was done practically. There's no CGI here. CGI basically didn't exist. This was all real. They engineered this gag on some street near Los Angeles. Think about that one. So they go back to the house with an assault team and they arrest everybody. Arjen Rudd shows up and he finally identifies himself as the Minister of Diplomatic Affairs for South Africa, for their foreign ministry. Basically, that makes him the boss of all South African ambassadors. Now, there's some irony at work here. Present-day South Africa is run by the ANC. The entire government is corrupt to the core. It's racist towards its minorities, towards Indians, towards half-breed colors, towards white people. South Africa is going to hell in a handbasket. It's turning into Zimbabwe. It's gotten so bad. Current American President Trump has instituted sanctions, which is just like Reagan did when they were pressuring the South African government to get rid of apartheid. So South Africa was tolerated basically because they were essential in the Cold War. The second it was over, South Africa was abandoned, basically. And that's how the communists were able to take over. So South Africa went from a fundamentalist Christian theocracy to a communist failed state. So here we have basically the bad guys from 1989 who are now the victims in 2025. So back to the scene. And so, South Africa, huh? The home of the Krugerrands, which is the little gold coins they captured. Rudd states, well, I have diplomatic immunity. And Rick says, well, I'm still going to bring you down. And Rudd says, my dear police officer, you could not even give me a parking ticket, which is true. You cannot give diplomatic officials a parking ticket or anything else. On the other hand, however, if they start killing people, if they start running drugs, and you can prove this, obviously this would not have been a case for the police. This would have been a case for the FBI or for some intelligence agency. This would be a scandal. This would be a bad scandal, and in a time when South Africa is under a lot of scrutiny. Um, it's a little convoluted that they would have their foreign minister involved in a drug scandal run through the embassy. It's a little, well, out there. But then again, they make good bad guys, so let's just run with it. So they're back at the station, and Murtaugh's team is suspiciously on his desk, and he shoos them off, and this reveals a plant covered in prophylactics. And they say, yeah, it's a rubber plant. Jens just ends up laughing at the situation because it's funny. Anyway, in the coming days, Rick starts harassing Rudd. He's everywhere. He's in traffic. He's demonstrating at the gate. He's looking into the security monitors. Pleases Rika, his secretary, who he met back at the house on stilts. Leo is at that point staying at Rick's beach house, and I don't think that's smart, but oh well. He's cleaning the place. Well, that is smart. Riggs gets a call from the office, and he can't find his phone because it's outside because, Leo dumped everything outside so he could clean. But Murtaugh hasn't checked in today. So Riggs drives over, and as it turns out, Murtaugh is on the toilet. And he's on the toilet because he can't get off because he found out there's a bomb under it. So Murtaugh says to Martin, look, keep this quiet, okay? Next scene, of course, hundreds of people are outside and there's silence wailing and there are lights everywhere. And the shrink shows up and basically she's warned, look, it's not a pretty sight. And the minute she sees the situation, she just sort of backs out of the room and she runs straight into Riggs. And I should have known. Where there's one, there's the other. Yeah, interesting and very unprofessional psychiatrist, but it's played for laughs, really. So the bomb squad is ready to defuse the bomb, and they order everybody out, including Riggs. And Riggs gives his typical stare. The bomb squad guy goes, well, okay, whatever. So what they're going to do is they're going to try to delay the bomb by spraying it with liquid nitrogen. Martin gets to pull Roger into the bathtub, and they have to get covered with a debris jacket. And he has to do this because he's been on the toilet for 18 hours. He's cramped. There's no way he's going to jump into the bathtub in time. So you get this sequence, and this is kind of a callback from the original and also from the start of the movie, where it's like, hey, we're going on 3. So Roger stops him and says, do we go on 3 or 1, 2, 1, 2, and then go? And it's like, well, okay. So they decide to go on 3. And they have this little moment. Martin sort of reassures him, Roger, we are not going to fucking die. And so you see the explosion, and the next thing you see is the toilet, and it's blasting out of the house, and it falls on Trish's car. Now, obviously, this is another gag, and this is to diffuse the high emotions. And that's another thing that this movie gets right. It was hinted at in the first movie, but this one really cements the relationship between Riggs and Murtaugh and how close they are and how important they are to each other. And it's important to the plot, and we will see that in the final scene. Now, Leo is in the South African consulate. He wants to talk to an immigration officer, and he says, well, I have this friend and he wants to immigrate and you have to talk him out of it. And so this officer doesn't understand at first. And so, well, why don't I just bring him out here? So he brings Alphonse, because he brings out Murtaugh. And so this South African official, of course, immediately recognizes the situation for what it is. And he says, look, this is really not a good idea. And it's a great gag. And of course, this turns into a shouting match. And alarm bells goes off, security shows up, and Riggs uses this to gain entry into the embassy. This is a very strange and clandestine move. What's the probable cause here for these police officers to do this? Even if there was probable cause, this is embassy ground. So this is South African soil. They can just murder him. They can just kill him there because he's trespassing on in a foreign country. So this is an interesting situation, but they mostly play this for laughs, as we will see. So he gets into Rudd's office, and he doesn't have much time, so he just takes the top um, note from his notebook, hoping it will give him some kind of information, and he sort of hides behind the door. A whole bunch of goons come in, and it turns into a standoff, really. And so basically, Riggs explains, well, I'm kind of a loose cannon here. I can something just go nuts. Like right now, it's reminiscent to the Christmas tree sale scene. Anyway, Riggs warns Rudd to fold up his tents, and Rudd just says, "You just need to get out of here, Kaffa lover." This pisses Riggs off, and he cocks his 9mm, and he starts to play eeny, meeny, miny, mo, as if he's about to execute someone. And in the end, he just shoots the aquarium. Oh, those poor fish. They made me sad. They made me sad back in '89, and they make me sad to this very day. Anyway, he runs into Rika. He gets back with Leo and Roger. They look over what he stole from Rudd's office, and he just sort of runs a pen over it so he can see what was jotted down and on the note that was ripped off before. And it says Elba Varden Thursday. And they go, well, Elba Varden, what is that, a female name? What does that mean? Anyway, they get out. They go out to eat something, and I think they go to Subway. So they go out to eat, and Leo is really enthusiastic. He's an enthusiastic little guy, and he opens the door, and another car rams into poor Trish's car and drives the door off its hinges. That poor car. Anyway, so Riggs goes to find Rika in the supermarket. This kind of looks like a little like stalking, if you ask me. Or maybe he's developing an asset, whatever you want to call it. And so he chats her up, and she comes back with him to his trailer on the beach. Now, I highly suspect that trailer is there illegally. Riggs is not a play by the rules kind of guy, is he? Anyway, so Rika at some point asks Martin if Rudd is hiding behind his diplomatic credentials, and Martin says, "Yeah, he's not a very nice guy." Well, neither are you. Anyway, in the next scene, we get the horror movie. All the co-workers are killed. One gets blown off, diving off a diving plank, and the rest start to get blown up playing poker, you name it. That's brutal. And so everybody's up in arms, and the captain is alarmed, and he asks who are unaccounted for, and this is, of course, Riggs and Murtaugh. And so they start calling everybody up, and you hear the phone ring in Riggs's trailer, but he's having sex with Rika. So he throws a boot on the phone, and the dog shows up. He has his own little way of getting into the trailer. This is very important foreshadowing. And he throws another boot at him to get the dog to go away. Anyway, Murtaugh is with Leo, and Leo sees Rianne's commercial. This is a joke. He says, "Oh, I love this girl in this commercial." And Roger is, of course, mortified. This is his daughter. And he turns it off. "What are you doing? The girl's body. She makes me want to buy rubbers." Okay, makes you kind of think that maybe Riggs clued him in. Sounds like it. Anyway, so Roger goes home to check on some videotapes because he suddenly remembers where he heard the name Elba Varden, and he finds it. He celebrated the birthday on his boat, and that's the boat from the first movie. The Elba Varden turns out to be a big container ship. And outside, poor little Leo, is kidnapped by the Afrikaners. So the witness they are supposed to protect at all costs is kidnapped by the very people they are protecting him from, because Murtaugh is watching videotapes and Riggs is having sex with Rudd's secretary. Great cops. Wow. So inside, Roger is assaulted, and of course the fight spills over into the garage, and then we get the nail gun, and next up the next guy tries to strangle him. He kills that guy with the nail gun, and he says, "Nailed them both." Yeah. Murtaugh realizes Leo has been taken along with, his car, or Trish's car. Helicopters are approaching the beach where Martin and Rika are still fucking. We get a nice 80s boob exploitation shot because Rika, aka Patsy Kensit, has an incredible body. So the helicopters riddle the trailer with bullets. It's kind of like that Clint Eastwood movie. Martin and Rika, of course, escaped through the secret trapdoor that was revealed to us by the dog. I have to tell you, I miss the days when boobs in your movie were a normal occurrence, because now you have to go on the internet to see them. Whereas then, well, so the helicopter lands and bad guys come out and Rick stalks them and kills the guys with the machine guns who are there to finish the job. And he pulls the mask off of one of them and identifies them as Afrikaner by saying, the master race, because they're blonde and have blue eyes. Ironically, not all white South Africans are blonde and have blue eyes, but oh well, we'll go with it. They're the bad guys. So Rika and Riggs try to escape, but of course, there's Sam the dog who runs after them. So Rick stops and he starts shooting at the helicopter, and that ultimately peels off after it's been hit. The dog makes it. Yay! Not all animals die in this movie. So Rick takes Rika back to her apartment. You really have to think about that one. I mean, and he gets hit over the head. And the next thing you know, he sits in a straitjacket. So we get the straitjacket payoff. This was foreshadowed, of course. And the viewer who paid attention is now rewarded. Anyway, Forstell tells Riggs, I'm the guy who killed your wife. And of course, he has to rub it in because he's the bad guy. And he says, she didn't die straight away. She took a bit of time. You don't have much luck with women, do you, Riggs? Because, that's kind of hinting that Rika didn't exactly meet a happy end. So the bad guy drives off, just like a James Bond goon, not staying for the actual kill. The goons drop him in the water because he's weighted down with a straitjacket. So, of course, he's never going to get out. But, of course, he does, because he does his little dislocation shoulder trick. He's out, and the first thing he sees is Rika, who's down there, swimming with the fishes, as they say. He actually swims to Rika with his arm popped out of his shoulder. He gets out of the water and kills the bad guys. And after they die, then he pops his shoulder back in. I don't think so. I'm sorry. This is just a major. First of all, this has to be seen as a continuity error. This is just a mess. You can't hit anyone with a dislocated arm. There's no such thing. You can't swim with a dislocated arm. This doesn't work. This did not work for me. Suspension of disbelief, gone. Next scene, we see Riggs carrying Rika around on the beach, and he's having a psychotic episode because we go into lethal weapon mode, finally. And he calls Roger up to underline this. She's dead, Roger. She's dead. I'm not a cop tonight. It's personal. Well, Riggs, you weren't a cop when you broke into a foreign embassy. You weren't a cop for most of this movie. But okay, Roger tries to get him to come in. It's not happening, and he realizes something, and he takes his own badge off, and he puts it in a drawer, basically saying, well, we're in lethal weapon land. So basically we get lethal weapon energy back, which is great. They just had to murder Rika to do it, because that's what sets off Riggs, and that's what makes the audience forgive Riggs for going on a kill crazy rampage, because he's now just as bad as the bad guys. So at this point, the next scene, we see Leo being beaten by the goons. You can say what you want about Leo Getz, but he can take a punch. They want to know where the money is, and he's not giving it up. Roger intercepts Martin on the way to the Stilts house, and Martin says, well, don't try to stop me. And Roger says, no, work together on this. And so basically Roger has to go in because Leo is in there, and Martin says, oh, okay, be careful. He doesn't seem to care about Leo all that much, but still. Anyway, the plan basically is for Riggs to use his truck to, pull the stilts out of from under the stilt house. And meanwhile, Roger moves in and he blasts the bad guys trying to get out of the house and free Leo. So Riggs manages to pull one of the struts out of the house. This completely demolishes the place, and it just falls over and explodes. So I guess they had natural gas or something. I don't know. If this would happen to a house here, the house would explode basically because we are heated with natural gas. So they didn't actually demolish the original. It's actually a real house. Rebuilt it. They made a replica, which cost apparently $500,000, and built it on a hill overlooking the studio lot and destroyed it there. So it was a controlled demolition. There was actually a B-reel on the original VHS that I owned, where you saw Mel Gibson filming this demolition and playing jokes on it, horsing around, as he would say. So Leo is freed, and they go their separate ways. They basically tell Leo, "Hey, look, just go find the federal marshals on your own, and just take the cop car." And so Leo goes, "Can I sound the siren?" And really, can I sound the siren? And they go, "Yeah, yeah." And so he hugs them, and it's a moment. According to Donner, the scenes between Pesci and Glover and Gibson, the only thing Donner would do was worry about blocking it, and he would just let them do whatever they wanted. They had their lines, and they would just, he didn't give any direction. There was no need, basically, because their chemistry was so strong, and these guys were such professionals. It's not strange that they built the third movie around their dynamic. We get into the final chapter of the movie, which is the race to the Elbe of Arden, where they suspect the bad guys have fled to. You really have to wonder why these guys are fleeing or leaving, because why would they? They're protected by their diplomatic immunity and by their credentials as diplomats. So it's kind of strange, but still. So they take out a bunch of goons surrounding a container, and they look inside, and inside it's just full of money. And this is an interesting scene. Roger is tempted by the money. And he says, "Well, with what I'm holding in my hands, I can just put my kids through college." And Riggs goes, "Well, go ahead, take some, do some good with it. This is the 80s. So they get locked into that container. It's going to be put on the ship. And so Riggs has an idea. As the container is loaded, the car that's also inside blasts out of it, and money just snows down all over the ship and all over the area, which is something Shane Black originally wanted. He wanted it to be Coke, and he wanted that Coke to snow all over LA, which is one of the gags that would have been worked into the original, because that was set during Christmas, White Christmas, because it's snowing. That's why they ended the movie on Jingle Bells, but they ultimately didn't do the whole Coke thing. But they did do this because they did think it was a good idea. They just did it with money. And so Rudd goes, "Oh, our money." And he goes, "Just make sure they're dead." Roger and Martin upsile from the container. Where did that rope come from? How did they get upsile climbing harnesses? How does that even work? Don't think about it. This is an action movie. Just move on to the next. Anyway, they had to move from one set piece to the next, and this is how they did it. So Riggs murders a bunch of goons. Then we hear Mel's voice yelling the names of all the people they murdered, because he's indiscriminately killing people, diplomats, in fact. And well, you have to have a good reason for that. And so all these officers that were murdered by them, and Rika, of course, and Vicky, Martin's wife, all of them. Anyway, he gets into a fight with Hans. It's kind of like the first one, where it's sort of semi martial arts. So Hans Savat kicks him, and Riggs nut punches him, and then Hans pulls out a knife and he knifes him, and Riggs pulls out the knife and rams it into Hans's guts, and the guy limps. Riggs gets to the remote. He blasts the remote down, and then the container falls on top of Hans. Roger shows up and he waves, and "Hey, are you okay?" And in the next second, we see Arjen Rudd riddling Riggs with bullets, with this old World War I Mauser pistol. Now, why they use that particular gun, I don't know. I think it's just they ran out of guns to show. Afrikaners have their own weapon industry, but they didn't use any South African guns. They just used foreign guns. So anyway, Rudd holds up his passport and he says, "Diplomatic immunity." Just for the way he said it, you want him to be shot. So, of course, Roger executes him and ends the line with, "Has just been revoked." You can't say it more 80s than that. And this has to be done in the 80s, because these days cops wear body cams and they can't do stuff like that anymore. Here comes the alternate ending to the original ending. Because in the original ending, Martin Riggs dies from his bullet wounds. They left the set up for another 2 months during post-production, basically because Donner was under a lot of pressure to keep Riggs alive because, otherwise, how do we do a sequel? So in the original ending, Riggs dies in Murtaugh's arms, and then the song Knocking on Heaven's Door starts. And that's what's supposed to be the end credits. Instead, we get a joke about cigarettes. Those things will kill you. We get Cheer Down from George Harrison, which is a completely different vibe. It's basically cheerful. And that's basically telling us, hey, Riggs is going to live. It's laughing hurts him because he's full of bullets, but he's going to live. They don't really use the Eric Clapton version of Knocking on Heaven's Door, which is awesome. I actually had the original vinyl back in the 80s, and I basically bought it just for that. Anyway, so that's the end of it. They both laugh, and the helicopter zooms up and show you the city. Harrison's Cheer Down starts, and that's the end of an awesome sequel. And in my opinion, this is the best Lethal Weapon in the series. There will be two others. I've seen both of these once. I'm going to see them twice for podcast purposes, probably more. But originally, back in the day, I watched them in the theater. And that was it. Critically acclaimed movie, immense box office success, cemented Mel Gibson as a major player and a wonderful addition to the franchise. Because that's what we have to use. The minute you get a sequel, then suddenly it becomes a franchise. And of course, it also spawned a awful TV show that we will never mention again. Anyway, that's it for this season. I'm going back to the drawing board, think of stuff to watch and stuff to talk about in the next season. I'll see you when I get back. Bye for now.